Hey everyone, and welcome to In the Running, a podcast where we bring your local elections to life.
We're your hosts, May Dapkus and Olivia Self, two juniors at Mountain Brook High School.
We started this podcast to help inform voters on who is running in their local elections and what those candidates do on a citywide scale.
So, we're asking the real questions about their goals, values, and what they want to do for your communities across Alabama. This is In the Running.
Hey y'all, welcome back to In the Running. My name is Olivia Self.
And I'm May Dapkus, and today we are joined by Mr. Doug Jones, former U.S. Senator and running for governor of Alabama.
Well, thanks for having me, ladies. I appreciate this. It's great to be with you.
Yes. Okay, so first we want to know a little bit about you. Can you tell us anything about your hobbies, interests, anything outside of your campaign?
You know, I grew up in Fairfield, U.S. Steel. A lot of union members in my family, and I grew up there, went to Alabama, Cumberland Law School. Practiced law here in Birmingham, but did a lot of different things as U.S. Attorney, U.S. Senate, whatever. I've gone back and forth in and out of public service most of my career. Been living here all my life, though, and love outdoors. Love to hunt, love to fish. I just don't get to do as much of it as I would like. And right now, campaigning's keep me pretty busy.
I'm sure.
Okay, what first started you on law and public service?
Well, those are two different things now. Okay, let's talk about law. Okay, when I went to college initially, just with all disclosure, I thought I would probably be in medicine. I'd do something. And then candidly, I found out that me and blood don't get along very well. So I thought, maybe this doctor thing. Not to mention that I don't think my grades were quite up to par. But I got involved with a lot of different organizations at the University of Alabama and switched over to law, which was really my calling. I really had followed a number of lawyers and decided to go to law school, and I've really enjoyed law, the practice of law. I was a trial lawyer, so I did a lot of cases. I was with juries, and that was great. Public service is a little bit different, though. I've always, from the time I was young, been interested in politics. I guess from the time I was very little and John Kennedy was the president. Yes, folks, I'm dating myself. I get that. I understand that. But that really kind of gave me an interest, and I followed politics and history just all my life. And my first job out of law school was working with then Senator Howell Heflin from Alabama. He had been a Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, and I got to know him then, and then worked with him for a year in Washington, D.C., and he really helped me. He instilled in me the value of public service, that it's really not just about politics and holding a job or running for office. It's really about public service, and so that's what I've been doing, just kind of back and forth, off and on throughout my entire career.
That's great. So looking back at your, extensive and impressive career, what moment most shaped you to run for governor today?
Oh, what moment most shaped me to run for governor? I don't know if I could point to a specific moment that propelled me to try to jump into this race. Mm-hmm. Candidly, after I left the Senate in 2020, I left January of 2021, right before the January 6th issues at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think that I would necessarily run again. I stayed very active in a lot of political things around the country and in Alabama. Went back and worked at the White House for about 3 months during a confirmation process for Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. But I didn't see that I would necessarily run for office again. But I got to tell you, guys, that, there are people hurting out there across the state right now. And people are looking at a lot of things that really bother them. It's not just the affordability issues that we hear so much about politically. People are looking at the war right now. They're looking at the institutions of government and how they've changed. They're looking at what appears to be a lot of corruption. It's things that people are concerned about. And that is not only in areas, urban areas like where we live, but it's also in the rural areas like farmers are struggling and those kind of things. And I just kind of looked around and I didn't see what I felt like people offering the real hope and change that I think that this state is not just due, but I think that they're looking for. And at the end of the day, I felt like we still had something to offer to the people of Alabama. And so we hit this ground running, and it's been interesting, and it's going to be interesting through the fall.
Yeah. Okay, that kind of leads into our next question. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing Alabamians today, and what are some solutions to those?
I think there's a lot of challenges. And what's interesting about this is that it's very difficult to kind of put all the Alabama folks in one bucket or two buckets, because we have challenges. We have an incredibly diverse population. We have incredibly diverse areas where we go from Birmingham and Huntsville into more rural areas where you could just drive for miles and hardly see any houses. So I think the overall problem right now that people are facing is that affordability, just like the rest of the country. And that has only gotten worse in the last month or so with high gas prices because of the war. People are concerned that they don't have the funds necessary. Their income is not meeting their expenses out there, that people are having to work two jobs. Two-wage earner families are having to work 2 and 3 jobs with their children just to make ends meet. Our cost of living in Alabama has gone up dramatically. Housing costs, transportation is a big issue, and our electricity bills are an issue, but yet our income levels have not grown up at the same level. So I think people are looking to try to have more stability than they have. And I think that's a challenge across the board. It doesn't hit as much in areas that the three of us are used to. But I'll tell you, there's folks struggling. There's single parents out there still taking their children to the emergency room for routine health care because they don't have good health insurance. So those are the kind of things when you look around and you think, we can do better. We can do better where we are. I'm doing fine. My guess is that you guys are doing fine. But there's a lot of people out there that are not, and they need our help too.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So Alabama is historically Republican. You made history as a Democratic senator. So how do you think you would balance your personal values with the values that your constituents may hold very strongly?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I don't think those values are different. Mm-hmm. Okay. Political philosophies, political points of view are not the same as values necessarily. I think my values mirror most all of Alabama's values. Not everyone for sure, but I think my values are basically the same. We value a good education. We value opportunity. We value a day's pay for a day's work. We value how we treat each other and our neighbors. Those are the values that I think are across the board. And historically, Alabama has not always been a red state. In your lifetime, it has been, but in my lifetime, it was just the opposite when I was coming up. So things change and people look. And when you have one party that controls state government, and I think this is true across the country, and it has been especially true in Alabama, when one party controls and so dominates your state government, they get complacent, they get arrogant, and sometimes they often get corrupt. And that is a problem. That happened with Democrats over the years, and it caused a major shift around 2010 in how people started voting and who they were voting for. I think people are looking at those kind of changes now because they look and see that the state is not delivering on the things that they are truly needing and instead focusing on things that they really don't need. They're pandering to certain elements of society. So I think me as a candidate for governor, my job is not to run as a Democrat or a Republican. My job is to run as somebody who cares, somebody who has values of Alabama, somebody who listens and talks and understands Alabama and tries to work with people. I've told people ever since I started running for the Senate, the biggest problem in this country right now is that we have too many monologues with people and not enough dialogues like we're having today. Mm-hmm. And we need to have more dialogues. And then I think if we have those dialogues, people are going to see my values, and they're going to see a reflection of their own values. And I think that that's important. We're not going to agree on everything. There is no way that we're going to agree. But look, my wife doesn't agree with me on everything. My guess is your parents don't agree with each other on everything, and they sure don't agree with you on everything.
For sure.
So, but that's okay. We still love each other. We still care, and we get along, and we make it work. And that's what I think is going to be the hallmark of this campaign, but also, more importantly, the hallmark of a Jones administration.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Alabama is one big happy family.
Well, I'm not sure it's all happy sometimes.
No, but
we're one
working
family,
towards it.
and we can be happy. Let's put it that way.
Well, we're stuck with each other.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And but that's a really good point. It's a really good point. We are kind of stuck with each other, and we need to start acting like it.
Yeah.
And we don't always act like it with our neighbors and folks that we don't agree with politically and otherwise. So you're absolutely right. We should be one happy family, and we are stuck with each other. Let's make the best of it, and let's make that rising tide lift all boats.
For sure.
Okay. Yeah, our next question is, when you are elected, what would be your top 3 measurable goals for office?
3 measurable goals. Okay, the first one is pretty easy, and that is I want to get better health care for folks in this state, and that means expanding Medicaid. Alabama is a relatively poor state compared to the other states in the country. We are also a pretty unhealthy state across the state from one end to the other. We need to expand Medicaid. We should have done it a long time ago to give those low-wage earners the opportunity for good health care. I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate the fact that right now in Alabama, Medicaid, to qualify for Medicaid, is so, you've got to make so little money to be able to qualify, that there are so many people in this country, I mean in the state, literally a couple 100,000, that make too much money. They're working. They work hard, but they make too much money to qualify for health care through Medicaid, but they don't make enough money to be able to buy good health insurance. And that is a problem. So because they have to pay the electric bills, they have to get their transportation to their jobs, they have to buy groceries, they have to buy clothes, they have housing costs. And so all of those costs eat into the ability to use for health care. And so if we expanded Medicaid, we'd keep rural hospitals open. We'd keep rural Alabama, the economy in these rural communities going a lot better. So I'm going to do that. I can't completely do it alone, but I can expand the Medicaid eligibility and then work with the legislature to try to get it funded, because there is a cost to it. But we get a huge billions of dollars coming in if we were to expand Medicaid. That's one thing that I think is pretty measurable. That's easy to do. The other thing I would try to do is to try to focus our business a lot on small businesses. We do a pretty good job in Alabama right now of attracting industry, big businesses, out of state, overseas corporations that come in. We have a lot of tax incentives for that. What I want to do is to try to create a pool of those same incentives to go to Alabama entrepreneurs, folks in these rural areas, folks that want to start a small business. Give them some economic incentives so that they can start what hopefully will be a family-owned business down the road, and that we can keep kids in Alabama. So many of your classmates are not going to end up staying in Alabama right now, and we need to create those incentives to do that. The other measurable goal is connected to both of those, and that is increasing what we call the workforce participation of folks in Alabama. People that are able to work, want to work, but there are obstacles for them to get a job. Those obstacles could be the cost of child care, the cost of elder care if they're taking care of their parents or grandparents. It could be transportation issues. We need to remove those obstacles so that people can get in the workforce. We have low unemployment, okay, but we have one of the lowest workforce participations, which means there's and interestingly, even with low unemployment, there are jobs available for people in Alabama that exceed the people that are unemployed. We need to get our people working and get them back into the workforce. And that is going to be 3 of the top things I do. I'm going to give you a 4th. Okay,
Bonus.
this is a whole different. This is we're going to bring a lottery to Alabama. I mean, we tried that 20, 30 years ago, and we couldn't do it, and now it's a mess. But I am going to push. I'm going to be a champion for a statewide lottery. We need the money. Right now, there are hundreds of millions of dollars that leave Alabama every week playing the lottery in Georgia and Florida and Tennessee and elsewhere. We need to keep that money in. We need to put it in education. We need to put it in healthcare. We need to keep it in Alabama. So there you go. There's 4. Okay.
My dad does love his scratch-offs.
Love the scratch-off.
Yes.
Love the Powerballs.
Yes.
Love the Mega Millions. It's all, and we just can't seem to get the legislature to do it because everybody in the special interest down there all want to get their hands on it. We're just not going to do that. We're going to focus on a lottery that's separate and apart from any other gambling legislation. We can do that separately. Let's get the lottery, get that money coming in, get the money designated for certain things that the legislature can't take away, and do it by constitutional amendment so people get to vote. And let's get that going, and let's keep that money here.
So you mentioned transportation as one of the big problems, and again with like the getting people back into the workforce. What do you think are the current problems with transportation in Alabama, and what do you see as some like easy solutions that you would implement as government?
Well, none of them are going to be easy. Okay, we're very reliant on our own automobiles.
Yes.
Which I am the world's worst. I love cars. Okay, I mean I love cars. My wife tells me we have too many, and I keep telling her it's like your shoes, honey. We can't have too many cars. Okay, so but we don't have as good a mass transportation, public transportation as possible, and we've got some in Birmingham, and there's some in other places. I think one of the problems that we've had with that is that in the 1950s, Alabama passed a constitutional amendment regarding the gasoline tax. Every time you fill up your car, you pay a certain amount, 30 cents a gallon, goes to the state of Alabama as a gas tax to build or improve roads, bridges, those kind of things. In the 1950s, they passed an amendment that said you can't use the gas tax for any public transportation investment. I think we need to repeal that. We need to start investing in some public transportation as we grow, especially as urban areas grow. You're not going to be able to keep up with the infrastructure. You're just not going to be able to build roads wide enough to accommodate everybody driving, and we need to do a better job. And folks have done it around the country. So I think that's a big deal. It will be a little bit more difficult in more rural areas to get some form of public transportation, and that is a big issue. But I think that we've got to start investing in that and start looking really down the road. This is not a 2 or 4 year project. This is a long-term project for generations.
Love it.
And your first measurable goal was healthcare, right? Expanding Medicaid.
Yep.
In 10 years, what would you see as a successful healthcare system for Alabama?
I would see more rural hospitals open. I can't give you a number, but we're losing rural hospitals. I would see new hospitals or new clinics, some healthcare delivery available in rural areas that don't have it right now. I would see that. I would be able to measure how many people in Alabama do have healthcare that can actually go see a doctor if they have to go to a hospital without relying on charities or either a different way that the federal government pays the hospital. So I think that would be one thing. We've got the numbers are staggering of number of people that are uninsured and seeking health care. That would be, I think if we could start that process now, in 10 years, you will see far more than just people that are insured and healthier. Remember, when you have a healthier workforce, you have a healthier business climate because those employees are doing more and they're staying at work more. They're healthier. And every hospital that opens in a rural area or stays open has jobs and businesses surrounding that hospital that support it. You attract doctors, you attract nurses, you attract pharmacists in the area. So I think that would be a way. You can look at the number of people that are insured, that have health care as a metric, You can look at the number of hospitals that have moved off of the endangered list and somewhat stable, and the ones that have been reopened.
Okay, moving on to a little bit of a different topic, education. Alabama is ranked nationwide in the bottom tier for education. What do you think is the root cause of that?
I think it's a lack of a real investment. And it's an investment that goes from one end of the state to the other. We have incredible school systems in places in Alabama. You girls go to one. Mm-hmm. My kids graduated from that system. But you go down, go 60 miles south of here, and they're going to struggle. And we need to have a little bit better investment, I think, across the board. I worry about the legislation called the CHOOSE Act. I don't know if y'all know of that, but the CHOOSE Act is the one that passed a couple of years ago that allows for taxpayer money, my money, your money, to go to private schools. I'm a very strong supporter of public education. I believe in public education. I believe in the teachers that teach in public education. And so I'm not against private schools by any stretch. I think that they serve a wonderful purpose. But I think that is a separate choice that families can make for whatever reason they want to make them. And sometimes in the past in Alabama, it's not been for an appropriate reason. In the past, in eras when I grew up, it was to keep black kids and white kids from going to school together. That's what they were called, segregation academies. I don't think that's an appropriate purpose. But I do think that they serve a strong purpose, but I don't believe that taxpayer money should necessarily go. And under the CHOOSE Act, there's no accountability for those schools. There's no standards for those schools to follow. They just get the money. And that's wrong. And we are going to lose more state education dollars when they remove these, what they call the income caps. And so I think that one thing that we can do is to modify the CHOOSE Act some way or either eliminate it. The other thing, and it goes back to my lottery question, I think if we give teachers a raise, we got to incentivize people to teach. We got to incentivize, folks. When I was in the Senate, I sponsored a bill that would provide some grant money and some things to allow local schools to start working with young people in high school that would like to be teachers and help them pay for their college with the understanding they come back and teach in that school system. Mm. We need to think outside the box for that. Mm. They did that in Mississippi. It's called the Mississippi Miracle. I will say we've done some good things. Third grade reading is up in Alabama. Our pre-K is doing pretty good. We just need to have better investments and more strategic, smart investments. It doesn't always have to be adding teachers. We can add teacher assistants. We can add tutors. Any number of things that we can do. But we've got to be focused on it, and we got to do it in a way that protects public education.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so kind of combining these two topics together. Mm-hmm. How should we handle expanding Medicaid and improving education, and while still being fiscally responsible at the state level?
It's a great question. What do you think?
I think the lottery was a good idea.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's a start. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be the be-all to end-all. I do think that we need to do a revamp of all state government and see where we can cut and what we can do. It is going to be a challenge. The bill that Congress passed last year, they call it the Big Beautiful Bill. I call it the Anything But Beautiful Bill, because it's going to hurt Alabama. It's going to really cause some changes in Alabama. I think Medicaid expansion, to me, ought to be a little bit easier, because for every dollar we put in, we get so much more back, and it will add to the economy to do so many things. We could increase the minimum wage for folks, okay, and that doesn't affect the state coffers. Now, it may affect businesses in different ways, but again, it raises all boats. So I think there are things that we could just move around, take a good long look at this. The lottery proceeds, I think, is certainly a way to do that. The old saying is, well, where there's a will, there's a way. We need more people to say there's a will to expand Medicaid and get the people their coverage. There's got to be a will to get better outcomes for maternal mortality and better outcomes for infant mortality. There's got to be a better way, a better will to get the way to do better education and to get, as you said, those metrics in which we are at the bottom. I tell folks all the time, look, if you are satisfied where we are, I'm not your guy, okay? We're going to shake it up. We're generally at the bottom of all the lists that are good, and we're at the top of most of the lists that are bad. We need to reverse that trend. And where there's a will, there's a way. We can find that way if we all work together.
Across the media, we've seen Alabama be criticized for terrible prison conditions, and we want to know what you think the issue is and some ideas you have on improving this.
Well, we're criticized because they are horrible. Yeah. They're horrific. Anybody that has watched the Alabama Solution, the documentary that was nominated for Academy Award, could not walk away from that without having their stomach just churning. I mean, and for certain public officials that are in office now to essentially say, well, they can keep their Academy Award, we've got our Alabama values. That is just unbelievably wrong. You know, the values, what I saw in that movie was not Alabama values. Okay, nothing that I grew up with, nothing that I've taught my children. My guess is if it's not the values that you have in your family, we've got to do a better job. I think one of the biggest issues is transparency. You know, you lock those prisons up, and everybody. Alabama has had, and I have done a lot of criminal justice work in my career, both as a prosecutor, as well as a defense lawyer, as well as a public servant. And we have this attitude of, well, you do the crime, you do the time. Lock them up, throw away the key. Well, that is just the wrong attitude. People need to be prosecuted if they commit a crime. They need to go to prison if they commit certain crimes. But most everyone will come out of prison. And we need to recognize that, and we need to have more programs that allow for reentry. We need to treat people in a different way so that they don't become hardened with there. So there is a money issue because we're spending $1.2 billion on a new prison, and we haven't even started the second one just yet, and that is not going to provide the answer. We've got to do things to reduce the prison population in ways where people can come back into society, be productive members of society, pay their taxes, be able to vote, and have some say in where the state is going. And I think those are going to be the biggest issues. But I think transparency, it starts with shining a light. That's what that documentary did. It shined a light on the horrific prisons. We've got to spend the necessary resources to get good, trained guards, pay them what they deserve, but also hold them accountable when they cross the line. And we got to quit paying lawyers millions of dollars to defend the indefensible. There's got to be some wholesale changes. I do think some progress is being made since that movie was the final scenes were shot. I think there has been some progress made, particularly on the parole commission. In fact, just this week, the legislature did a few more things to try to help the parole situation that I think is helpful. So changes are on the way.
So we talked before about the budget and fiscal responsibility. So if you were to be the governor, where would you focus Alabama's resources?
Well, look, the interesting thing about Alabama is the resources are almost dedicated already. Mm-hmm. You got the gas tax that goes to roads. You've got the education trust fund that is used only for education. So the general fund is not as big as folks think. I think you've got to start looking at every department. You've got to be very transparent. I think the biggest problem, and people have heard me say it, you've heard me say it a couple of times in this podcast, that I think one of the biggest problems of the Alabama government right now, people just don't know what in the world is going on. And we need to give people better access to these records, then better access and be out there more and talking to folks. And when you do that, you can find out where the programs are that can either be cut or cut back and moved, and some of those resources moved around. It's a process, and it's not going to be an easy process because there are special interests that are vested in money going into certain areas. We've got to make sure that money is being there for people. I want to put more power back in the people's hands, and you do that by giving them more information.
Yeah. Okay, if you had attention of every Alabama lawmaker for 1 minute, what would you tell them that needs to change right now?
I'd probably tell them they just need to resign and let's just get some new folks in there, okay? I mean, that's the one, just say, please, for goodness sake, go out of session, go home, and let's just try this all over again. No, seriously, again, I go back, what I would like to wave a magic wand and for them to do is to get away from their political team, okay, their political tribe, and not feel like that they've got to pander to either the right or the left, and understand that they represent an interest, okay, a political point of view. But if we can talk to each other a little bit more, we can find ways to find agreement. Our legislature does that on occasion. They just did one, thank goodness, with Bo's Law. It protects animals. It protects dogs that are tethered to chains in a front yard of a home. And there was actually controversy about that, okay? And a lot of the legislators abstained from voting on it because you had a special interest group. So what I would just say is that, look, we all, regardless of which party you run under and get elected under, we all really want the same things. We want good education for our children and grandchildren. We want good health care. We want to have good jobs. We want a good economy. We want the same things that everybody wants. It's just how you get there. And if you recognize that the goal is basically the same, how you get there ought to be a little bit easier than what we make it. But we let others dictate it. And that's the biggest problem in Alabama right now, I think, is that when people get elected to the legislature, they go down to Montgomery and they listen more to the lobbyists and special interests that provide the receptions, that provide their campaign contributions, that do all of these things, and they don't listen as much back home to the people that elected them. And so I would basically just say, okay, now y'all, let's get in a room, all right, and just look, pretend everybody has no clothes, and let's just understand that we're kind of in this together, and let's work all this out. Mm-hmm. I think that can happen. I mean, I really have enough faith, and I'm hoping that the people of Alabama in November will actually exercise that right to vote, not to vote that straight ticket. I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in Alabama is straight ticket voting, and to look at every candidate in every race and decide who is it that you think could do the best job of getting most of the things that you want, knowing that you're not going to get everything.
Okay. This is kind of a fun question. Why would a lifelong Republican vote for you?
Because I can get good things done for Alabama. I've got a record of doing that. The thing I think that most folks, even though they may not have voted for me at the first time or the second time, I didn't vote strictly the way they wanted to. I took some really hard votes when I was in the U.S. Senate. But I think if they look overall, they will see that I had the people of Alabama's best interest in mind. And I did things to support Alabama, to help folks. And I think if they would just look, and what I would say to them is that, look, I realize that you have voted a certain way for a while, but just because you have been somewhat conditioned to vote that way for a while, take a look at my record. Don't listen to some of the garbage that you may see coming across your social media feed about me, which is probably not true. Do a little homework, talk to other people that know me, look at my record, and if you like what you see, then at least give me some serious consideration for your vote. If you don't, fine, vote for the other guy. It's fine. That's what you need to do. But you need to make sure you don't go in there and just say, well, he is running on a different political party, so I am automatically not even going to examine his record and do things. I think that that's wrong. There's a place in our democracy for party loyalists. And I think that it's a good place. They've got to be the ones to grind out, to do the things necessary for political parties. But I think most people ought to be in that more independent camp, to where you have to compete for their votes. You have to explain to them, and they have a genuine interest in what you're saying. I think right now I would tell them that all politics is personal. And look and see what you think I might can do for your families and what I'm talking about versus what the other guy's talking about. Mm-hmm. Because I think if you do that, you're going to give me a serious look and a serious consideration and likely vote for me.
This one's kind of a challenge question.
Okay.
In one sentence, why should people vote for you?
Because I've got a record of service to the people of Alabama that I think exceeds any other candidate in this race, Republican or Democrat.
Amazing.
Love it. And that was one sentence.
Yeah, not even a run-on.
Look at you. Yes.
Yeah, that surprised even me for coming up with just one sentence. Okay.
Bam.
Great. Okay.
Short and sweet. We love it.
Yeah, we're nearing the end. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was great to meet you and talk with you.
Hey, good luck, ladies. It's great to meet you. I'm sincere when I say this. Thank you for what you're doing. With this podcast, having public officials, public servants, putting them on the hot seat like this, asking good, tough questions. I wish I could get more young people in high school engaged the way that you're getting engaged. And I hope that others and your friends are watching you do this, and they will get engaged, because guess what? They're all going to be voters very soon, and it's your future, not mine. It's your future that I am working toward. It is not mine, but it's yours. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and that was so sweet. We really enjoyed listening to you and learning from you. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to vote on the primaries on May 19th, and we'll see you next time. Bye.